Good evening, Danvers, and welcome to our February 16th Select Board hearing meeting. My name is Dan Bennett, Chair of the Danvers Select Board. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. The order, which you can find on the remote meeting page of the town website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the meeting. For this meeting, we are remotely meeting via Microsoft Teams. We do have members of the public that wish to participate under new business or as part of an advertised public hearing, needed to register themselves accordingly. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present. Fellow board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Maureen Bernard.
Yes.
Bill Clark.
You're on mute, Bill.
I'm present. Can you hear me?
Thank you,
Yes.
Bill. Yes, we hear you now. Thank you.
Okay.
David Mills.
Yes, thank you. Here.
Gardner Trask.
Yes.
The board tonight is followed by a number of staff members. I'll read who I recognize. Obviously, the town manager, Steve Bartha. Is Jen Breaker with us tonight? I don't see her now. Kathy Ellsworth, town clerk.
Here.
Director of Administration Finance, Rodney Conley.
Here.
Director of Land Use Community Service, Aaron Henry.
Here.
Steve, would you read off who else you have with your staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're also joined tonight by David Fields, our Director of Planning and Economic Development. Jill Summit, our Treasurer Collector, is on. David Lane, our Director of Utilities and Public Works. Clint Allen, our Assistant Director of Utilities and Public Works. And Stephen King, Town Engineer. And just looking back up the list, I believe that's everybody.
Thank you very much. Also on the agenda tonight is Steve Horn, Eric Mitchell, and a guest with us tonight is Matt Duggan. Are there any other pre-registered guests? Okay, thank you very much. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda and materials. We will now turn to the first item. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective, clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting members. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they include their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair. Taking care to identify yourself. And there are no public hearings tonight. These are just presentation and updates from staff. And any vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And I will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Don't know that we have a flag, but we all know what it looks like. CE, there it is. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation.
Under
Under
God,
God.
indivisible,
Indivisible.
with liberty,
liberty,
and
Justice
for all.
world. Thank you. Can we have an approval of the minutes of February 2nd, 2021?
Mr. Chairman, Selectman Trask moves we approve the minutes
Thank
as
you.
presented.
Is there a second?
Bernard seconds.
Second, thank you. We'll take a roll call vote. Trask,
Yes.
Bernard,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Mills?
Yes.
And the chair also. At this time, is there any new public business to be heard? Thank you. We'll go to item 3, introduction of 2 new board committee members, Steve Horn to the Municipal Light Board and Eric Mitchell to the Finance Committee. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also excited to introduce Steve and Eric. In keeping with past practice, as new members are appointed to boards and committees, whether those are select board appointees or not. If those appointees have not, been before the select board, we'd like to invite them to introduce themselves, and so that you all can put faces to names as they go about working in service to the town. So we have, I'm going to take them out of order because one led to the other. We have Eric Mitchell on the call. Eric is leaving the Light Board to join the Finance Committee. You did receive some background information on Eric. His job title is a little out of date. When he first reached out to the town, he was the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Pathways for Children, but he is now the President and CEO of Pathways for Children. So without further ado, I'll allow Eric to introduce himself to the board.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, and everyone. Having been here before, and Steve kind of gave my background on my work, coming off of the Municipal Light Board, but I'm still on the Cultural Council, and, as a Danvers resident, really believe in giving back to the community and participating, and I'm just happy to be able to do that with the Finance Committee.
Very good. Welcome. I know you'll do a good job on the Finance Committee. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments, questions?
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Great.
And our other guest, Steve Horn, will be sliding in to fill Eric's seat on the Light Board. Steve also reached out to the town wanting to get involved, has a background in utility software, which is a perfect fit for us on the Light Board. He's been a long time volunteer in a number of ways with the community and decided it was time to join a board. So Steve, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to the board.
Sure. Really looking forward to working with the team, with the utility board and the electric board. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, selling meters, gas, electric, and water with software and systems. So I'm looking forward to bringing some of my education. And for you, those who don't know me, although I know most of you, been a Danvers resident for about 45 years. My wife teaches at Thorpe School, and definitely wanted to give back to the community that's been so good to me. So thank you very much, and appreciate the appointment.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for coming tonight to say hello to us.
Thank
You know everybody on this.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed my years on the Municipal Light Board as a volunteer before I became a selectman.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Go clock. It's kind of eerie to hear you talking without your voice. I'd swear it's your dad. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's good. I'm excited to join, to give something back like all you have. And, obviously, as you know, my dad would want me to do too. So I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Steve. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd be remiss if I didn't make 2 points real quickly. One, we have both of these gentlemen filled out our talent pool form, and that's the document we keep on the website and we periodically push out on social media and drop off. We used to drop them off at places like Dad's and Donuts at the libraries on Saturday, back when we could actually meet in person. But this is the form we've been using very successfully the last 5 years to bring new voices and faces into the municipal process. So anybody who may be listening tonight, you can find the talent pool form on the website. We don't have to have an opening. You can just fill it out, let us know what your interests and skills are, and eventually we'll try to match you up with an opportunity. And just as for those who may be watching, so the Finance Committee is appointed by the town moderator. So Eric was appointed by Pat Frazier. The Light Board is a town manager appointee, but the form will identify, we have a number of committees that are appointed by the Select Board, several that are elected, including town meeting, which our guest, Mr. Duggan, serves on. So lots of ways to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, the Finance Director will discuss FY21 second quarter revenue and expenditure reports. Welcome, Rodney.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. What we have in front of us tonight is the quarter two update of FY21. You'll notice not on the expenditure side, but on the revenue side, the budgeted numbers might look a little different than the first quarter. That's because we had our recap, our tax rate setting, and as part of that, some of the local receipts in particular were adjusted based on a first quarter of actuals. So in that section, the budget may be off a little bit from what you saw when we passed the budget back in June. I'll tick off a few, but if there are any questions after, feel free to jump in. Real estate and personal property, as expected, are on track. Motor vehicle and boat excise look like they're down, but again, those are timing. Those are springtime bills for the most part. The first revenue category that's of concern, which we've talked about for several months now, is hotel motel taxes. We have 2 quarters in and we're at 43.6%. Depending on how it shapes up over the next 2 quarters, it looks like that could be a potential revenue shortfall. Luckily, the other similar tax, the meals tax, looks like it's on target. It's slightly above now, but I think when we get to the end of the year, the way things are progressing, we should be able to at least reach our budgeted amount, but not exceed it as we have in prior years. Another one of note is the in lieu of taxes. So again, that one was adjusted as we talked about in quarter one. We still have not received the FY20 pilot payment from partners, and we couldn't conservatively estimate that we'll receive their payment in 21 yet either. So as a result, that was stripped out. Otherwise, it is pretty much on target in terms of in lieu of taxes. Some of that is just timing related to the electric pilot payment. Also on the revenue side, another one pointing out license and permits. As you can see, we're already at 90%. That's due primarily from building permits, which are already at 611,000 through December 2020. So again, a good sign. I believe that was the last item of note. Again, the other ones are trending as expected, maybe a little bit behind, but we're expected to meet those targets on some of the other ones.
Rodney, before we jump off the revenue, just you mentioned a couple times that we're on track. I just want to remind the board, we are on track to hit revised estimates. Yeah. So back in June when we set the budget, we actually revised those targets below where we had been in recent years. So meals is on track to hit our revised target, but hotel.
That was the question I was going to ask Steve. What was that number before? What did we revise it down from? I forgot to look.
Rodney has that. He'll can see him. He's digging already.
We looking for the hotel or the meals? Sorry.
Well, we might give us both while you're there, while you're looking.
So the hotel tax, it started in March at 1.55 million estimate. We dropped it to 1.35 when we passed the budget in June, and it's now based on the tax rate setting at $915,000. So again, over $600,000 drop in our estimate. So we're on track. We're actually still not on track to hit that, even that 915,000 number. In terms of the meals, it started at 905,000 in March. We dropped it to 755. And then at the tax rate setting, we dropped it at 600,000. When I say on track, it's on track to hit that 600,000 number.
Okay, thank you for that update.
Sure.
Any other board members with questions?
We're gonna have questions on the expenditures?
He hasn't done those yet.
You know that, okay, I just don't want to miss it.
You won't, we'll let you know. Rodney, you want to go ahead?
Sure. In terms of expenditures, general government is as expected. It also includes FinCom, which is unexpended at 230,000, which I'll touch on a couple points down. Public safety, fire overtime is at 63%. We're hopeful that we can be able to rectify that through some surpluses in the permanent salary, as well as maybe in the police permanent salary budgets to offset what looks like it'll be an overage in the fire overtime. Education is tracking similar to previous years. Again, it's more of a timing issue that it's at 39%. Essex Tech, so these are scheduled payments, but it's worth pointing out that the budget passed reflected us moving $105,000 into FinCom reserve for later discussion and a potential reduction in their assessment. Essex Tech did not reduce their assessment, so their number is at the $3,085,000. So at some point, in order to make the full payment that we're required to, we would need a transfer from the Finance Committee into the Essex Tech budget.
130,
105, yeah.
105, thank you.
Yeah. Public Works is as expected. Now, as of December, we had a snow and ice budget well under 50,000. Then January and February happened, so we're over 50% now, pending some billing and other costs that need to be quantified. But so that will eat into some of what looked like a surplus on paper at the end of December. Land Use and Community Services is expected some potential savings there through a couple vacancies. Recreation, library as expected, our scheduled debt service, our retirements and annual contribution, and employee benefits as expected. Again, that's the timing of certain charges. That's why it's not exactly at 50%. And then our state assessments, that's our cherry sheet assessments. It's also worth noting that some of these expenses may end up being transferred out if they're eligible for COVID funding. So we have two revenue streams for potential reimbursement. One is through FEMA, and the other is through the CARES Act. Myself and Heather Varney, our town accountant, are always scouring for ways that we can get some reimbursement on some of these costs. So I know there are a couple of items in here that should be transferred out to FEMA or CARES Act in the coming months once we, come to an agreement that they'll be accepted to those funding mechanisms.
Okay, Bill, you had a question?
I got a couple. One is a question. My question is on general government, that FinCom unexpected $230,000. What is that?
So that's unexpended. So we set a budget normally of 125,000 for FinCom. This year
Right.
it's at 230. We haven't spent any money year to date out of that. I
But
was just mentioning that's why it may look that we're only 46% expended versus 50%. Is due to the fact that we have 230,000 that we haven't touched yet in the FinCom reserve
Why do we add that extra money to their reserve fund?
to cover the money we reduced the Essex Tech assessment budget by.
Okay, thank you.
You're
An observation on the public safety. I wonder if, I know there's a lot of overtime in the fire department due to their COVID-19 impact, but I'm wondering, several years ago, we cut two positions in the fire department, and it leaves us with two of the squads. When they have very few people out, we have to hire someone in as overtime to cover those sections. And I'm wondering if it might be prudent to look into see whether it might be cheaper to hire back two firefighters so that all the groups have the same number of people on duty, so they can absorb the one or two, the two people who might be out if they're sick, and not have to hire in at overtime. It's just an observation.
Thank you. All set, Bill?
Yep.
Any other members with questions?
Set.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rodney. Appreciate it. Number 5, the board is requested to vote to approve the sale of $13,022,270 in general obligation bond anticipation notes related to school, water, sewer projects to Jeffries LLC at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $94,541.68. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We made Rodney deliver the bad news on the revenue front. I feel it's only fair to let him deliver the good news on the debt issuance front.
Thank you.
Sure. So as mentioned, we went out for a short-term note to cover $13 million in projects mostly related to the Smith School. That made up $10 million of it, as well as some other monies for some water and sewer projects, as well as the Highlands roof. We received 6 bids. Jeffries LLC, as you noted, was the winning bidder. The coupon was 1.25% with a $94,000 premium, which means it's a net interest cost of only 0.1472%, which is a great rate for a short-term borrowing owed to general market conditions, as well as S&P, once again affirming our AAA credit rating. So this was, if you remember, we were awarded the AAA back in 2019. This is the second time they've affirmed it, both times in the middle of the pandemic, which again, I think is something the town should be proud of. They noted, as usual, a strong policy, strong budgetary flexibility, strong liquidity, and a good economic base for the town. This short-term note will extend through October, and then in October, depending on market conditions, we'll make the decision whether or not to permanently finance at hopefully a good rate. Otherwise, we could always roll over the note, depending on the long-term planning of the debt budget.
Thank you, Rodney. And you accompanied this with the ratings direct from them. And I'd just like to, it's an excellent report. Everything pretty much is favorable, but I think we should point out on page 6, under pensions and other post-employment benefits. Do you want me to read it, Rodney, or do you want to kind of recap what it means to us?
I do not have it in front of me. I apologize.
Well, I'll read it. In our opinion, a credit weakness is Danvers's large pension and OPEB obligation, particularly given the pension system and OPEB's trust low funded ratios. While the use of an actuarially determined contribution is a positive, we believe some of the assumptions used to build the pension ADC reflect what we view as slightly weak assumptions and methodologies, which we believe increases the risk of unexpected contribution escalations. Notably, the plan did not meet either our static or minimum funding progress metrics in the most recent year, indicating that the current plan assumptions are not making progress in funding the outstanding liability. Although the town continues to pay its full ADC, if pension costs increase faster than the overall budget, the operating budget could be pressured.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, so that's, we have our assumed rate of return for our pension valuation. Right now, that's at 7.5%. We've dropped it a couple of times in recent years. It was at 8, then it went to 7.75. Now it's at 7.5. I believe the S&P number is more like 6.75. It's something that the retirement board wrestled with this most recent valuation, and I believe they'll look to probably lower it in the next valuation, which will be January 1st, 2022. The issue with the assumed rate of return is, again, that'll push out some of those where it would drop from an 8% projected increase each year to a 4% in a few years. That would raise those 4% up to 6 or 8% as well. So again, it's probably a prudent thing to do, but there is an impact on the budget over the next 10 years as well.
It's prudent. For years, I've been saying we need to reduce it. We have come from 8 to 7.5 in increments, and I look forward to continuing that downward assumption. Any other members have any comments? Kathy, Town Clerk, do you need this motion read in its entirety?
I think you need to vote each piece. Rodney, would that be correct? Or are you taking one vote for the whole thing?
Yes, there's 5 votes. Do you need them all at once, or can I read the whole thing? Or can someone make a motion for the whole thing and we vote all of them? I saw her nod.
Yeah, Rodney's nodding. I think that
should be fine. Yep.
Read it in its entirety and take a vote on its entirety.
One vote. Gordon, you want to read it?
Mr. Chairman, Selectman Trask motions the following. Voted to approve the sale of $13,022,270, 1.25% general obligation bond anticipation notes, the notes, of the town of Danvers for February 25th, 2021, and payable October 22nd, 2021, to Jefferies LLC at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $94,541.68. Further voted that in connection with the marketing and sale of the notes, the preparation and distribution of a notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated January 27th, 2021, and a final official statement dated February 4th, 2021, each in such form as may be approved by the town treasurer, be and hereby are ratified, confirmed, approved, and adopted. Excuse me. Further voted that the town treasurer and the select board be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver a significant event disclosure undertaking in compliance with SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the town, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the notes for the benefit of the holders of the notes from time to time. Further voted that we authorize and direct the town treasurer to establish post-insurance federal tax compliance procedures and continuing disclosure procedures in such forms as the town treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, or if such procedures are currently in place, to review and update said procedures in order to monitor and maintain a tax-exempt status of the notes and to comply with the relevant securities laws. Further voted that each member of the select board and the town clerk and the town treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes.
Clark, I second it.
Thank you. All in favor, I'll take a roll call vote. Bernard,
Yes.
Mills?
Yes.
Clark,
Yes,
Trask,
Yes.
and the chair also approves. It's unanimous vote taken by roll call. Please note, board members, Jill needs us to come sign these documents. She's got them all ready for us tomorrow if you can, or Thursday. I think Friday will be snowing, but if you you need 3 signatures at least, I believe. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I could ask, I realize that town hall is open by appointment only while we're in COVID. Are town hall hours late on Thursday still by appointment only?
Yes.
All right, then I'll be in on Thursday. Thank you.
great, thank you. All right, very good. Is that all you need, Mr. Town Manager, on that?
It is. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Jill. The board will hear an update from the Director of Planning and Economic Development. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Fields is on the call with us tonight. I think momentarily he'll be sharing his screen with the board to run through some slides that he put together. You received a letter from David with your packets on Friday describing generally why he is before you tonight to talk about some updates and some opportunities in the downtown that he and his staff have been working hard on. With that, I would turn it over to David and let him run through his presentation.
Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I will share my screen for a short
Go right ahead.
slideshow.
Yep.
Thank you. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so Steve briefly mentioned I'm here to talk about the downtown tonight, specifically what we're attempting to call the civic space of downtown in Danvers Square. So I'm just quickly going to talk about the rezoning history, move on to physical improvements about what we're actually doing, then discuss how we're doing this, how the money got to us and what we're going to do with it, and then outreach efforts to property owners and business owners within Danvers Square. So a bit of rezoning history and just geography. The area we're talking about is right at the corner of Maple Street and Conant Street. It is, I think, currently known as the CVS Plaza, or that's how I refer to it commonly. This area was identified as part of the rezoning that passed in February 2020. I think even going as far back as the 40R district up on North Maple. However, it was identified by our consultant and through planning efforts to become more of a civic space or a park or more public oriented in some fashion. So with that, we thought we could build upon this with a few opportunities offered up by the state. I will move along to show you what we're discussing. So physical improvements we are envisioning for this area really include outdoor seating, which could be used for simply relaxing or social gathering, outdoor dining from any of the many restaurants in downtown, folks could take food and go over there and recreate in their socially appropriate groups as they see fit. And we were hoping to even allow some evening activity with some lighting. Now, that doesn't mean we're necessarily doing anything, but it would be nice as the weather gets a little warmer and it gets light out a little later for there to be a little bit more activity downtown past, wintertime hours of 5:30 to 6 p.m. We're also adding some bicycle parking for any folks coming off of the rail trail. It's a quick shot right down to walk your bike down either the sidewalk or go down the road to park. And then additionally, some activity or games space, which is the large green area you see on your screen. So obviously, all of this will have to comply with all necessary social distancing regulations as set forth by the state and the Board of Health. The way we have this laid out, we should be able to comply quite easily. It's really just a chance for folks to gather. Been stuck indoors for quite a long time, especially due to COVID, and it'd be nice to see some smiling faces, even though they're behind some masks. So moving on, this is a photo of, I believe, downtown Norwood, similar to what we're talking about. So as you can see, quite distanced, but just enough of an area where there's some activity going on and it allows you to meet with folks in your home network outside of your living room, really, at this point. In addition to that, directly across the street from that plaza, we have received funding to purchase and deploy a small, what is known as a parklet. It's really just a platform that's ADA compliant with the curbing that it's next to. This parklet's fairly small. It's about 9 to 10 feet by 13.5, so it would only really take up one parking space. This would be directly outside of the Kathmandu coffee shop, which will allow any patrons of any restaurants to move from the sidewalk onto this parklet area for some outdoor seating. Again, we have some bicycle parking there and a barrier for folks parking automobiles. So this is just a small shot of a parklet that was deployed in Melrose. So similar to what we're discussing, this one's even a bit larger than I think we're envisioning. Just another photo of activities taking place on parklets. And then moving into funding, I mentioned we received some help for these. The bulk of the funding for these projects was coming from the Mass Department of Transportation. They have a program called Winter Shared Streets and Spaces. We applied to that program and were successful. That money will mostly be used for the physical improvements I'm discussing. So things like purchasing planters, purchases of the parklet, any picnic tables, lights, and landscaping would come through that funding stream. We also received a small grant from Mass Development called through the Commonwealth Places grant program. That is actually a matching grant fund, and it's a bit of a unique one. So Mass Development will give us $8,000 if we can crowd fund $8,000 from the community or private parties. So it's not necessarily free money. The community itself has to have some skin in the game, but we think we can pony up $8,000 with a significant outreach effort, and that money will mainly be used for the activities to take place. What activities though they are currently, I can't really go into detail because it's mostly COVID dependent. Obviously, we'd like to be able to open it up as much as possible, but we'll see as we move through the pandemic. So as I mentioned, the Mass Development money will be available to peruse, the website I should say, on March 1st. It's through Patronicity. We're calling the project Poppin' Up on Maple Street. So this website will be launched March 1st, so anyone can go on, donate as little as $1 or as much money as they'd like. It could be $8,000 to this program to help us match Mass Development's funding. So feel free to check out the website for anybody looking at home. It'll be live March 1st. And then moving on from there, we're also going to be conducting outreach throughout this spring, I guess you'd say. Aaron Henry from our department has reached out to some local businesses directly impacted right in the plaza. We'll be doing a larger outreach effort to property owners and business owners throughout the square. We hope we have their support, and we're also available for emails or calls from anybody who is interested at all. So with that.
David, read that bottom sentence. You may want to make a correction before you put it out in the public.
Yes. Okay. Duly noted. Thanks very much. So happy to take any questions or discuss this any further.
Surely. Maureen, questions?
I think it's wonderful. I've had some property owners, businesses in the square, mention about hearing about this grant money, and they're looking forward to it. Thank you.
David?
An excellent job of planning by especially David, but also the planning department. Sounds very exciting. Wish there were more space, but I think it looks like using excellent use of the space that we have. So good luck with that, and thank you.
Thank you, David. Bill?
I've been talking to at least two of the owners downtown. One of them hadn't heard anything about it, and it's going to be right in front of his property, his business. I'm concerned about the 13 parking spaces that we're going to lose with this. Plus, I'm with this pocket park, which I didn't hear about before. That would be another space. So we'll be losing 14 spaces, including a handicap space that we'd have to somehow mitigate, I would think. The impact I see is dramatic to the Santander Bank because their only entrance is from Maple Street at this parking lot. They do not have a back entrance like Panini and CVS does, and couldn't take advantage of the parking that they own behind their businesses. I think it's a great idea, but I just hope that we can make some kind of mitigation to help the parking situation, because as you probably remember, when we had the square redone, probably 20 years ago now, we had to fight with the state to get those extra 5 spaces on Maple Street at the south side of this little parklet, so that we'd have enough parking downtown. These spaces are pretty active, and I don't really respect the traffic study that was done on one day several years ago that may not show that this is very heavily used spaces. I think we could finally really find out how well these spaces are used right now, or the impact of them, by having a traffic person who does the monitoring of parking spaces do an inventory every time she goes through that. I think she sweeps that spot twice a day when she's working, and we get some kind of an idea of how many spaces we've got to find space mitigation for. And I don't see any place that we can get mitigation easily. And 13 spaces or 14 spaces is quite a price to pay for the downtown businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Gardner?
Sure, I got a couple of thoughts. One, to build off of Selectman Clark's comment, how are we going to respond to the people who have complained about losing those parking spots? That is a sizable number. People are used to being able to, and I realize it's not a great answer, but people are used to being able to park right in front of the buildings, the stores they want to go into it quickly, leave quickly, and head on out. So I'm just wondering what your plan is for communicating and handling the inevitable complaints. No matter how grand an idea is, no matter how beneficial we all think it is, you are going to get some feedback. And I'm wondering how you're planning on handling that feedback. And then I get some other questions.
Go ahead.
I would, sorry, David, just to share, and then I'll cede the floor. But I think, I asked David to come before the board tonight to share this before we started moving, doing too much public outreach. One of the things we talked about last summer is that the pandemic has given us a chance to do a little experimentation with some of our regulations. And through these opportunities, there's a trade-off, but it's a chance to do it. These are temporary concepts that give us a chance to sort of see in real life how these ideas and elements work. One of the main points that came up through the rezoning effort was that we have a very auto-centric downtown. Gardner, what you described is the convenience of being able to fly in, hop out of your car, grab something, and then take off. I think part of the effort that the planning department, the consultant, and ultimately town meeting approved it was to try to shift that balance a little bit to more of a downtown as a place people might go and stay. And so I think, not to diminish the loss of the spaces, because that is a real consideration. We know we have a lot of parking in a lot of places, but we get a chance now to kind of see how civic space would live and breathe in the downtown for a short period of time, and we'll learn lessons from that and be able to do future planning based on that. David, sorry to jump in. I just wanted to add my 2 cents.
No, thank you. That was very well said. I will note that we are taking this matter to the Traffic Advisory Committee later this month to discuss. And also, as part of this effort, with some of the money we received, we were hoping to reinvigorate our wayfinding program to create signage to identify those other parking areas that folks may or may not know about that are located close by. So.
Couple of other questions. Can we use the 40R, any of the 40R money as part of the crowdfunding? You said we have to have skin in the game. We've got money from 40R, and some of it specifically for the improvement to downtown. If we come up short in a crowdsourced, crowdfunded amount, can some of those fundings be used there?
It's an excellent question, Gardner. It's a question that I have into mass development right now. We asked the question ourselves, so we're waiting to hear from them.
All right, can the parklets be movable? I mean, can we schedule moving them? As much as we would think a shop owner may want it and desire it in front of their shop, it may also not be. We may be anticipating the benefits they won't realize. You know, and I know Ohm down at Kathmandu, and you said that's the first spot. Well, again, his business is very oriented in coming in, getting something, going back out. It's in the morning. It's a quick turnover kind of thing. I'm just one, and I can also anticipate other restaurant owners saying, "Well, what about me?" And so, can we come up with can we make it so that it's designed so it's movable, and change locations every 6 weeks? Move it in front of Fresh Market for 6 weeks. Move it in front of Supremes. Just shuffle it along so all the businesses can realize a little bit of the benefit, as opposed to because if you put it in front of Kathmandu, they usually have tables there. What's it going to do to that traffic flow? Is it So I'm just wondering if you've researched the opportunity to benefit multiple businesses by making it a portable thing. It's every few weeks moves.
So to answer that, they are movable. I wouldn't say they're technically incredibly mobile. We were envisioning this as a small pilot, as we said, to see whether the community likes it, hates it, uses it, doesn't use it, what have you. Totally open to the idea of moving it. I think when we came to you for the relaxed COVID regulations, we had identified a few other spots that could be used physically. We'd obviously have to work with those business owners. We had a few who said they did not want it, so we'll have to reach out to them again and see what they say.
Okay. And then the last thing is more of a personal note than anything. When you show Flagpole Island, the first shot you showed had everything inside the curbway, between the curbway on the inside of the island to the storefronts, and you had all the green space and tables there. That island was redesigned 20 years ago. And in the redesign that moved it out of the center of town to where it is now, Martha Swindell and I ran a pretty successful memorial brick program to pay for the fiberglass flagpole. Those bricks in the area were sold as memorial bricks. I would not want tables on those bricks. That would be if you're standing at the flagpole, the first field is a field of memorial bricks for people who served, and then there's a gap, and then the next field is for other memorial bricks that people in the town purchased for family members for other reasons. That is a memorial brick island, and I would not want to see tables on there as a general rule. As a matter of fact, people keep asking me if we'll open that program up again, and maybe if we had time, that could have been a new crowd sourcing or crowdfunding opportunity, because I have at least 50 people on a list that would love to get a brick now, and I'm sure if you opened it up, you'd easily get 200 or 300 more.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll look at the design again. I don't think we have any intention of necessarily putting the tables directly on the brick. We're trying to keep it in the asphalt area, but.
Okay. So the first photo showed everything in between the curb to the building. Mm-hmm. The last photo you showed included that area as shaded as part of the area. And so I just want to make sure that people who haven't been here 20 years and remember that, sometimes you lose historic knowledge, but that's specifically what it was built for.
Sure. Yep, we can stay out of that area for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gardner. David, it is town-owned space down there now. It is probably a public space, but with you changing the use and more people will use in that area, will political sign holding be allowed?
Uh, honestly, haven't thought about it. It is public right of way, as you point out, so I don't know that it would be any different than any other public right of way where folks are holding signs.
And then the other side of that is, do people want to be down there relaxing and having people holding political signs in their face?
Sure.
Dan,
So-
this is
Yeah.
civic space. That feels pretty civically oriented. I think with the suggestion that Gardner made about respecting the bricks, I think there will be space. This wouldn't be something that would be right up to the edge of the curb. So I think there'd be a way to accommodate all current uses. And I think, yeah, to answer the question for David, we wouldn't be prohibiting political speech where it's currently permitted in that intersection. I think
Right,
that,
and I don't want to push those
Yeah.
people into the street itself.
Yep.
So when you get to that point and you're designing it, keep that in mind.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, David, for the presentation. I look forward to further information. I will make a note that a recent trip to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, along the restaurants, there are little sections all along the sidewalk or street for people to sit and gather. Many of the restaurants and storefronts took advantage of it. I don't suggest we shut down all that parking, but it's something to consider, that it does draw people to visit.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. One more thought is that portlet, Bill and I, being farm related, know that those kind of decks can easily be built on skids and moved. And I would presume that they would be moved out in the winter time.
Of course they would, yeah, I would think so. Thank you.
A question, because you know what they say when you assume.
Yeah, those would be moved out. It's a system of piles that it's on to maintain ADA compliance with the crown of the road. We have to make sure that it's flat and level with the granite curb. So, Yep. But yeah, they will be moved out of there well before any snow falls.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, may I, while we have David, may I give him an opportunity to give the board a very brief update on the recently passed Housing Choice Act?
Please.
David, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to highlight anything from the fairly large bill that still has no regulations associated with it for the board?
Oh, sure. I believe a couple of weeks ago you received a written correspondence from me in your packet, but we have only a small update from DHCD since that point. Basically, they said all towns are in compliance with the recently passed, for lack of a better word, called it multifamily inclusionary provision, unless otherwise noted. So for right now, the town of Danvers is well in compliance, as are any other communities in the Commonwealth. That said, I think going forward with the new zoning we passed downtown, we will maintain compliance regardless of what DHCD comes out with for future regulation and guidelines. So that was my takeaway on the overall, the large part of it, the part that anyone seems to care about in the news.
So the thrust of the legislation was to reduce the city council or town meeting thresholds required to make certain zoning changes. And that was included in the bill. David referenced the multifamily housing requirement for MBTA communities. I think that's a stretch of the definition to describe Danvers as a MBTA community, but we were included on the list. As David mentioned, we believe the recently passed zoning satisfies that. There were some other elements within that bill related to things like EFLAs that I don't know that David has an update tonight. Maybe he could speak generally to that, but certainly we're awaiting some regulations out of DHCD to give us the detail on some of these aspects.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Through you, I'd actually ask Aaron Henry if David can join us at an upcoming Danvers Affordable Housing Trust meeting to go over the changes. The trust has a direction to discuss with the planning board zoning, expanding our current multifamily inclusionary zone, which is very tight and restricted, as it were, to broaden it. So this seems to dovetail into that trust's plans to benefit from the Housing Choice Act details.
Thank you, Gardner. And as I understand it, this law is enacted immediately. It doesn't have to wait 90 days. So anything that can be done can be discussed and move forwards with. Is that correct, Steve?
That is correct.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, yes,
I
Bill.
hate to interrupt. I tried to get the word in before they started talking about this. Could I go back to that park for a second?
Certainly.
I have an idea that you might want to consider for the planning of that park. This is before any of our times, even before my time or David's time, David Mills, that is. The square had a circular horse watering facility in the square that was removed from the square sometime in the 1930s or 40s, whereby you had a circular raised item where the horses of people who were downtown could drink water while they were down there or having a rest. That was given or loaned to the Daughters of the American Revolution, and is over on Holton Street right now, to the right-hand side of that building. And it might be something you might want to consider to have kind of a unique historical artifact from the old Danvers Square that could be moved back there and be one of the major planters. It would make a beautiful planter. And I'm not sure that they'd want to get rid of it, and I'm not sure that we could accommodate it in these plans, but it's something from a historic standpoint that I think we got to consider. And anyone can see that planter. It's over on Holton Street to the right of the Samuel Holton House.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to know. Okay. Anything else, David?
That's it for me.
That's it for you? Okay, all set, Mr. Manager?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think all the board members have said what they need. Okay, thank you. The board will hear a presentation from DPW electric staff regarding the cost of service study and an update on the meter replacement program. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have David Lane and Clint Allen with us tonight. And you received a memo on Friday from Mr. Allen describing the study that was done last year and the recent action by the Municipal Light Board. So we invited David and Clint to provide a kind of an overview of that process and outcome and take questions, and then briefly provide an update on the meter replacement program that we sort of started right as the pandemic hit and lost some momentum on. So with that, I would turn it over to David or Clint.
Thank you, Steve. What we thought is we could have the electric rate discussion first, take questions, and then we can talk about the meter replacement program quickly after that, if that's all right.
It's all right with me.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. The cost of service study, I'm sure Gardner remembers doing them. It's a standard auditing report that we do every few years in an electric division like ours. It takes a look at the two pieces of the rate, both the operational part of the rate and the fuel charge part of the rate, to see if what we're charging for rates appropriately covers the costs of what those pieces cost. At this time, we did it was a very thorough cost of service study. It was a good report. We're very pleased how it came out, but it had good news and bad news. On the power supply, what power costs and how much we were charging the customers for power cost, that we were doing very well. We were even able to lower that charge a little bit this year. However, on the operational side of the budget, on the electric rates that we need to raise to cover all the costs of running a utility right here in town, not the cost to buy and get the power here to town, those costs, we were below what we need to bring in. Essentially, we're losing money each year. This is primarily due to the fact that over the last, I believe it's 4 years now, we've had very, very flat sales. We're not seeing an increase each year in electric sales like we were seeing for the decade before that. Because sales are flat and we have normal operational costs that increase each year, the operational part of the budget had caught up with the rates, and actually the costs had exceeded what we were bringing in on the rate side on operational. when we looked at the operational side of the budget and how we were charging our customers for that, we studied the industry standard and the recommendation of our consultant, and they found that we were not using any type of a customer charge, which is a fixed fee a customer would have once a month that would pay, and that is intended to cover base services such as meter reading, billing, all those things that never go away. And there are also those costs that even if one of our customer goes to Florida for the year, doesn't use electricity, it still costs us money to have the meter there and to read that meter and to have those people as a customer. So customer charges are what has been, or so a customer charge is what has been recommended for us to add on to the electric bill and use those charges to offset operational costs. It is something that we've recently done on the water and sewer side. However, we had never done this on the electric side. The good news is it was recommended to institute a much larger customer charge than what we ended up doing. Clint can talk more about that in a second. However, we felt it was important to implement a customer charge, and because of the offsetting decrease on the fuel charge, we're able to, for customers with a usage of about 1,000 kilowatts per month, those customers saw no increase in their monthly bill for the year. So it was a good time, we felt, to implement the customer charge. We needed to do something in order to balance the budget, and so that's what we did right now. Clint, could you take us through the specifics of what we implemented for a customer charge, the recommended, and what we got?
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Mr. Chairman, Clint Allen, Assistant Utility Director. So, as David mentioned, we received our cost of service report last year. One of the first, key metrics they kind of went through was they right away, one of the first meetings caught on that we had no customer charge here in Danvers. It's, as David said, it's a utility, pretty standard utility practice. The investor-owned utilities have had one for a number of years. Pretty much all of our neighboring light plants also have a customer charge to exactly how David explained it, to cover those administrative costs associated with, hosting a meter account regardless of how much revenue we can bring in from kilowatt hour sales. So the study had recommended, they went through and they basically looked at the value of the electric system, and essentially, out of our 11,000 or so residential customers and our 2,500 or so commercial customers, what portion of our system they're really using, and what portion of that system we need to basically recover, through our rates. And for the administrative side, the original recommendation was for the residential class, the $23.22 per month. And it, the small general, medium general, and large general, if you look at that, if you have the memo handy, it's on the bottom of the first page, the summary table there. So we took a look at, what they had recommended. We went, with conversations with the municipal light board. We really thought that if we try to implement something like that, not only is it a new concept to, to our customers, it's also, it's a pretty, it could cause a little bit of rate shock, you could call it. So we had, going through a number of months, we decided that we would implement for 2021 to go in with 1/3 of what the recommendation was, roughly. So for residential, that went from, essentially no charge up to $7.50 per month. And, as David had, explained it's an interesting concept because since it's a fixed charge, our lower use customers will feel a larger, percentage impact to their, their monthly bill. Whereas, large customers, like if 2,000 kilowatt hours a month is your usage at your your home, you will actually see a potential decrease in your bill in 2021. So we went through and we determined the average residential R1 bill uses about 750 kilowatt hours a month, and with this introduction of this customer charge, that would impact them, 2 to 3%, on average, throughout the year. So if you want to, we can take a look at the second page, excuse me, the third page of the memo. That top graph is the 2020 to 2021 residential bill analysis. It essentially looks at what, took an example bill from 2020 and then takes an example bill of 2021 based on how many kilowatt hours you use per month, and you can kind of see how those settle out.
I want to jump in for a minute if Clint is done. I don't want to cut Clint off if he's not done.
Steve, one more quick thing, just and then you can jump in. Is it
Okay.
Clint picked up on it, and I just want to be clear with the board. For our commercial accounts, those are the small general, the medium general, the large general. Those all had a customer charge previous to this. It was our R1 residential that did not have any customer charge. The cost of service study came up with the recommended charge for each of those 4 categories. In the what we found on the R1, when we chose what to have for customer charge, we did it at I believe it's 23%. If I get that right, Clint, 23% of what the consultant recommended.
It was, came in at like 32%.
Okay, I'm sorry, I transposed that. 32%. So for the R1, the G1, and G2, we went with 32% of what the consultant had recommended and what the cost of service study had recommended. For the large generals, our customer charge was already so that one also we went with 32%, and that's how we got to the number. Just wanted to add that in, Steve.
So you brought that up, David, thank you. So your small general is going from $5 to $11. And your large general is not increasing. So
Correct.
that means that my $196 a year bill on my small general is going to increase by $72 and be $132 out of the 102. Well, actually, it's going to increase. The percentage-wise, it makes no sense why you should go up so high on the small general. I mean, if I'm paying $200 and now 132, that's going to be a service charge, customer service charge. Makes no sense. You're thinking of the 32%. Didn't let you look at effect on those bills. And the large general to have no increase makes no sense at all. So I think you're not being fair to the small general owners, users.
So the small general users had already been paying a customer charge.
I know that, $5 a month.
Correct. And so when we looked at the cost of service study allocated the administrative costs over all of those categories, and it recommended what the fair number should be. And what we chose and what we recommended to the Municipal Light Board was to set a recommendation of let's go with a percentage of the recommendation for each category. So essentially, small general had been paying more than their fair share of the pie for many years, because in order to be fair, we should have had a customer charge on the residential side also. So this was our way.
You're going up so high on the general percentage-wise makes absolutely no sense. Just because you picked a 32% number of the recommended doesn't make it fair or equitable.
Can I try to explain what I think what David was saying stated slightly? And I think, Dan, your concern won't change, but what David is saying is the customer charges that we already had in place were not consistent across categories. So when the cost of service study was done and it calculated what the prorated customer charge would be by category if implemented, you would have been increasing the large general by something like 50 or 60%, to mitigate and then imbalance the adjustments to the other categories. So when they applied the increase and they looked at the across the board increase prorated against what was already being charged, that's where the large general was already at the amount, whereas the small general was behind on a prorated basis where the large general was, if that makes sense. It does have an impact, and I think that's
It's not equitable.
Yep.
I have to agree with Dan. I think that it's very, very unequitable. These large businesses can get away with no increase whatsoever, and we have to pay the fine of the efficiency of the town's electric department doing conservation. The reason a lot of our use is down so much is the very aggressive conservation programs we've had with electricity, the increased efficiency of home appliances, etc. But I can't see the small businesses bearing that kind of a brunt cost. I agree with Dan 100%. For my farm, it's gonna be unbelievable to go up over 50% just for the service cost, and there's not an extra service that I'm getting, essentially, other than reliable electricity, which has been excellent the last many years.
But I think that the specifics are going to remain problematic. One other point I was going to make when Clinton was done is that the theory here is that we have to maintain a system. We need employees who work in line services and tech services and engineering to make sure that we have a safe, reliable system on demand. Whether a customer is gone 3 months a year or puts enough solar on top of their house to be net zero for periods of time, you still have to have electricity in the street ready to serve them at a moment's notice. There's a cost associated with them. And as more and more of the rate is borne by power purchase, it means that other ratepayers, whether it's a David's widower on Ash or Purchase Street or the large commercial, has to subsidize that sort of on demand. And so speaking for the light board, the goal was to try to calibrate the implementation of this such that the median user wouldn't feel the full impact. But there absolutely will be folks who are adversely versus beneficially impacted by the implementation.
We don't argue you need to do this. We understand that. It's very simple to grasp. Again, you didn't really think through the increase to the different categories to be equitable. You just plugged in a 32% number and ran with it. Nobody thought about the impact to the individual categories and how it's affected.
So
If you
the
need
other
so much
piece that we
money,
did,
is it a matter of getting to a certain dollar amount to cover the costs, and this will get you there? Or is it just a formula that some, what was it, who gave you these numbers? A consultant?
So I think David was going to speak to the process that the light board went through, but just to be clear, the electric rate is a little bit like the mill rate, where the electric budget is not increasing by the amount of this base charge. It's shifting. So the municipal light budget remains roughly $40 million. The way that the rate is allocated is that some of it is shifted away from kilowatt hour sale dependent to a base rate. So the budget doesn't change. So there was no dollar amount necessarily they were aiming for. It was about shifting the billing process away from unit based to more of a fixed cost for a small portion of the total budget. Did I get that right, David? I don't want to speak for you.
Yes, you hit that exactly right. And the other thing that we did take into a factor is that when we looked at the small general, the medium general, and how many kilowatt hours they use each month, on average, they all use far more than what a resident uses. They're all going to see a much larger decrease in their bill because of our drop in the fuel charge. This will end up in a resulting net drop for them because the drop in the fuel, they're going to see the biggest impact from the drop in the fuel charge. It will offset this.
Not fully necessarily, David, but the point you're making is
Correct.
that with the base charge being implemented, all rates will drop So then the amount that you use will determine how far yours drops.
Correct.
So my previous bill, 30% of it was the current customer charge. And that percentage of 30% is gonna go up double. That's not fair, equitable.
Mhm. Member Bernard feels the same way too. I mean, I don't understand if we have good news and bad news, how we can't balance that a little bit better. I mean, we talk about the meters, aren't they electronically? The bills are online. We have energy incentives for our clients, for our customers. I don't want to see any increase, if anything, to the residents at all. It just seems like what Dan's saying, if we have to do something, but it has to be a little bit more even.
I agree that we need to even this out a little bit, but what isn't being realized is, or I don't think is appreciated. 10 years ago, actually no, 16 or 17 years ago, when I was on the municipal light board, this was a point of discussion then. Solar was just coming in; it was in its infancy, but we had people who wanted to put solar on their houses. And even back then, we realized we don't charge for the infrastructure. We don't charge for the plumbing. We don't charge for the poles and wires. We charge for we buried that in the kilowatt hours, and as such, we spread it evenly across to everybody. But you're right, Bill. It's a byproduct of being efficient. It's a byproduct of being good consumers. And it's on the water and sewer side. We're going to see the same thing on water sewer side. You have to put pipes in the street. No matter how much water you use, the pipe has to be there, or in this case, the pole and wire has to go all the way to your house, no matter what happens. We have to put in all the fifth feeder. When I was there, the big project was the fifth feeder. We had to put all the redundant loops. We had to put all the feeders in there. We have to maintain a system as if everybody's drawing off it. Some people don't. Some people don't do it as much. So it's like what this is really the toll road. This is the toll on the toll road. It's saying the infrastructure is there and the minimum cost is this much to bring a wire from electric company to your house. Then the consumption is added on, and that is what you yourself pay because you're a good consumer or you're a bad consumer. But there's got to be a way of separating out the infrastructure cost, which is real and fixed, from the consumption cost, which is fluctuating based on the user. But I agree that I think you might want to go back and rework. You're going to have a sticker shock anyhow. I know you don't want to talk about, you talked about doing it in the thirds. And we just got a new municipal light board member tonight. He's going to walk into a buzzsaw if we don't kind of figure out a way of balancing the load is probably, the wrong way to say it, but balancing this cost.
So we do have to acknowledge that first on the residential. So a residential customer with 1,000 kilowatts of usage, they won't see any increase in their bill.
What's the average? So David, what's the average residential?
Average residential is right between 750 and 1,000, right in there.
Okay, so that's average. So that's average. So you're going to find 40 to 50% of the people are going to be above average and going to feel the cost of this.
If you're lower, you'll see if you're below 750, you'll see a slight increase. The higher ones, they'll see more and more of a decrease the higher you go. So on the G1, like Dan mentioned, it'll be a $6 a month increase in the customer charge, but there's a drop in it for his power. So he take how many kWhs he has, and it's a drop from 566 to 528 per kilowatt. And we can do the math on any bill on that to see what the drop
So
in.
my average usage is 75 a month.
So
the bill,
unfortunately, a business like that, you only use 75 kilowatts a month, Dan?
I follow it.
So
on average.
So unfortunately, a business like the one that Dan mentioned uses very little electricity. That
We'll make
cost
up on it
changes.
on my residential. That's 1,200 to 1,500.
Okay.
And all my bills I do electronically. I pay online. There's no paper billing. You ought to give me a credit for that on 4 bills.
So
I'm sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no. You brought up a good point. Obviously, we're making great strides over the last year on people paying online. And Mr. Barth has talked to us about, what can we do about discounts for that and such. And we're really heading there because we're getting that's one of the offshoots that so many more of our customers are paying online, and it's fantastic. And that's saving operational costs. So the accounts that the chairman mentioned, his residential accounts that use 1,200 and 1,500, those likely will see a net decrease in the bill. That G1 account that only uses the 75 kilowatts a month, that's the type of a business that costs us a lot because we need to have the same meter infrastructure, the same readings, all of that. And because there's only 75 kilowatts of usage, we're upside down on, we're actually still probably losing money on that.
I'll close my business. I'll help you out. I'll close my business.
Well, we don't want you to do that, but
No, I think what you're doing is you're screwing the small businesses in town with this kind of a rate infrastructure where it's tipping it upside down, and you're expecting us small users to subsidize someone like Ann and Hope, I'm sorry, Costco or something else that has a huge usage, or you've got places like the Sports Center or the Prep or the Yacht Club who put on beautiful big solar arrays, and they're avoiding their costs in that respect. I've completely get rid of my water bill by having wells, but I can't all of a sudden produce all of my electricity all the time at a reasonable rate. I realize. So we are the victims. You are screwing the small businesses by doing this. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bill. If I may, Mr. Town Manager, when we briefly discussed this a week or so ago, we knew there would be questions. You didn't have all the answers at that time. And I appreciate David and Clint coming on tonight to explain it to us. We all understand the need for the charge to the accounts. I would just ask that David and Clint, you go back and look at these percentage increases and the effect it has on small businesses, G2 perhaps, and just come back and say, you're 100% right, or you can make an adjustment. Is that reasonable to ask?
absolutely, very reasonable. We'd like
Thank
to
you.
look at
Can
that.
I ask a question, Member Bernard? And can we also ask, if at all, Dave and Clint, thank you very much, what else can be done to save on those operational costs? I don't know, like we said about the online, like Bill was saying and everything, what can we do? If we could have some answers, maybe, some formulas or tables to say where we've been, how much has it increased, where, let's look at things where we can try to save for the residents. That would make me happy. Thank you.
Maureen, they did save because they no longer have people coming around reading meters.
Right.
On both the water and the electric side. So over the years, they have been taking cost-effective measures to have a more streamlined business. Can they
Right.
find more? Maybe they can.
Right, but like we talked about the online, David said, which I participate in, the energy, like Bill said, with the appliances, what incentive, solar panel farm that we've been talking about, right, Dave? We've been
Yes.
talking about something like that. I think that's really important for us to, to move in the future. So anything we can do to save money, like, we don't want to increase for the residents and the businesses. We want to keep naturally prices do go up, but we want to keep it affordable to, for our town residents and businesses. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman,
Maureen. Yes.
couple of points. I do want, I would like to just say in support of the light board, they had a very exhaustive study, and they spent several meetings discussing this. And I don't want anybody who may be watching to think that this was a sort of a quick decision that they came to. They went through the numbers with the consultant. They looked at the average. I think Chairman Bennett's business may be an outlier in terms of that class, in terms of power usage. So they were looking at the impact and how to blend that in. And I think, as was noted, this was a preliminary step, and I think the light board will welcome the opportunity to sort of revisit this and think more at the request of this board. To one of the points, Maureen, that you made, we are always looking, and we will continue to look at ways to kind of squeeze efficiencies. Electric, like most of our departments, is mostly people. So we have people in vehicles doing the work. We look at online billing and shifting away from stuffing our own envelopes. We can save some dollars doing that, but then you have to outsource that, and you have to look at the contract costs and the contract escalation. So Peter and David and Clint and their team do a great job of sort of looking at those things, and we will continue to do that and try to figure out ways to make sure that ratepayers continue to get a good deal. As noted on the last page of the memo from Clint, we're making adjustments within our rate, but when you stack up the rates here in Danvers, they're still very, very competitive. So, thank you.
Can I ask a question about that graph on that last page? Because the first thing people are going to say is, well, where do we compare? The bottom graph on the last page, does that include this fee? Or is it pure? Is it still just our kilowatt hours, our rate per kilowatt hours?
This does include the customer charge.
Okay, and the other towns include the customer charge as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, I think the only one on that list is Peabody is the only one on that list that does not have a customer charge.
Do they not have a customer charge, or it's not on the graph?
They do not have one.
But Gardner, just as a final point, the existence or non-existence of a customer charge wouldn't change the number on this graph, because again, we have about a $40 million electric light department. So we need to collect $40 million to cover our cost. A part of that is through rates, part of that is through the customer charge. So as your customer charge increases, the amount you charge for your rates decreases, your average cost won't change at all, because you're still collecting the same number of dollars of the year. You're just changing the formula for how it's collected.
I'm not sure about, I guess I'm not sure about the model of offsetting the kilowatt hours with the consumer rate. I would rather pay a flat rate. I know that the transmission to my house from the is so many miles, and it should be X amount per mile. And I should pay the same rate per mile as Dan pays to his, as Bill pays to his, and others pay to their, and make that my consumer rate, and not fiddle with the kilowatt hours, as it were, and still benefit. People who are good consumers should benefit from that. What you're saying now is a small business who's a good consumer gets whacked, while a big box or a big consumer reaps the benefit of that. It seems.
But not to belabor the point, but if we were to introduce the charge and not change the rate, we would be over collecting. So when you charge a customer charge, you have to drop the rate.
Charge, reduce the rate.
That's what's being done.
But not in the manner not in the model you're doing it, where where higher consumption is a lower rate. It just doesn't seem, I just don't see that right now.
Gardner's right, and that's one reason why we haven't done this for many years.
Higher consumption shouldn't equate to a lower rate. If anything, like our water board, the more water you use, the higher the rate is. It's a tiered structure. If you use a lot of water, you pay your actual tier goes up, and your rate goes up with your consumption. We are trying to. That is a method in which we're trying to encourage reduction in water use. Now there's no stick and carrot there when it comes to electricity. You've removed it, and I don't see it at this point.
Well,
I think at this point,
we'd like to sell as much
move on
electricity as possible to the most efficient customers we can find.
David, you going to update us on the meter replacement program?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, in case anyone isn't familiar, after we redid our meter system, it was a very good meter system we put in. We did identify there was a manufacturing defect in the residential meters. We were not pleased with that. we only found it as they slowly, about 10 to 12 meters a week would fail. We checked into it further, found out we weren't the only ones. There was a large manufacturing batch of these meters that had this defect, and it would cause a failure. You didn't know when it would happen, but it was shortening the life of these meters. Some went down in the first year. We negotiated with the company. We came to an agreement through a mediation process with the company, which that included replacement meters for all of our residential customers. That is all the ones that we hadn't replaced it yet. A year ago, we ordered the meters, they came in, we got the staff geared up, we were ready to start replacing meters, and the COVID crisis hit. So we just voluntarily stopped replacing the meters due to the impact it was going to have on our customers. The way we normally replace water meters in a bulk manner is to advertise a street. We're going to do Princeton Street or some street on this day, and you're going to receive an outage during that day. We couldn't tell the people when the outage was, other than we could bang on the door and say, guess what? You're going to get an outage in the next 5 minutes. We found that with all the students working at home, with everyone working from home for their businesses, that was going to be too disruptive to all of a sudden get a 20-minute to half an hour outage during the day. And it would be very difficult to tell the people exactly when it would be. So a year ago, we put the program on hold. We still have the meters in safe storage. They're ready to go. And so now we're in a holding pattern looking at when is it that we should begin this program again. It has been asked of us, could we do the program and schedule an appointment for each one? If we had someone, they call in, schedule an appointment, and then we go to your house and do your meter at a specific time. Unfortunately, the economy of scale of that would likely at least double the cost to install the meters. And we wouldn't be able to do it with the staff that we have. We were going to do it with some in-house staff, some temporary part-time help that could do it, as long as we did it street by street, route by route, systematically. If we went by appointments, now it's unfortunately the person hours just adds up. And then we go down to a street and we do this meter and that one, but we didn't do the one in between. We got to go back, and we end up going back and forth on that. So our recommendation is still to monitor the current COVID crisis that we're under. See, maybe if the kids got back into school, we'd probably start it right up and do that. We would recommend it anyways. But we also interested to hear from the board and others how much of an inconvenience the board feels as far as doing an outage where we can bang on your door and let you know it's going to happen in the next few minutes. But to do it more of an appointment than that it would cost far more than what the program we had planned. Clint, anything you want to add to that?
When you were doing the replacements before, and I saw somebody on Cherry Street, I figured I'm going to be probably pretty soon. So
Yep.
I could figure that much out, but then you stopped.
Right.
At the Page Street. So you're
Yeah,
right. You can't go knocking on doors and telling everybody they got to shut down because people are working from home. My wife works from home. Kids are in school working from home. So you're just going to have to go with the flow and figure it out, David.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was going to say, is there any downside to hiatus? If I'm agreeing with the chairman that kids are in school, parents. I'm full-time remote. My company will not be opening our offices again until at least August or September. And if you tell me at any point during the day I could be out of power, I would be in a lot of trouble. I'd have a lot of issues. Is this a grant or a program that runs out, or is it our schedule that we wanted to keep to if we could?
It's our schedule, Gardner. Part of the agreement was to get everything up front, get the meters, get the settlement with the company up front, so that now we have them in safe storage. We can do it at any time. The only thing we're doing right now is doing the 10 to 12 that fail each week. We're doing those. So we're only inconveniencing those people. The other good news is the meters, they still are recording the consumption. They're keeping that data stored in the meter. It's the sending that back to us. It's that piece that's missing. It
So
pops
can
up
we
as
also
a
make-
meter.
Can we also make meter replacement a condition of any building permit? Any building permit?
Yes, we could probably try to that. Let me talk to the building officer, but that we should be able to do.
And also, can we make a condition of any sale? We also, for sales, we require the fire department to go in and validate the smoke detections. So I think it would be prudent to recommend that we have to swap out your meter so that you, the new homeowner, start with a fresh, clean slate. You don't have to worry about in the old homeowner, if there was a delta between the what was captured and sent and what was actually consumed, would be reconciled with the former homeowner.
I think we
this
want to
rate-
think through that a little, Gardner, because who do you inconvenience? Somebody packing up to move out, or somebody who just paid mega millions to buy a house in Danvers, and they want to move in and they can't move in because they gotta get somebody to come out and change the
You
meters.
gotta have the
So think
fire
about it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it's a perfect plan. I'm saying that there
I
are
like
more.
the first idea, permits, change them.
Dave, I have a question. Member Bernard here. With the deficiency on those meters that we talked about, and you said that you're having, you're talking with them about some settlement, are they going to reimburse us for any time and labor that we have to go back out and replace that? Why should it cost, us, the town of Danvers, for their deficiency, meters if they weren't working?
We had to go through a whole mediation, essentially a lawsuit, and we recovered some of the costs towards
Okay.
that, but because we already are getting some use out of the meters, we couldn't get 100% of the replacement cost.
At least we get something, right? We can get something.
Yes.
Okay, great. We don't want to cost our residents anymore.
No, we feel we really did the best we could.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, David and Clint again.
Thanks, guys.
The board will hear a report from engineering and land use staff regarding town-owned land and implications for water management permits. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up next, we have Aaron Henry and Stephen King. I've been waiting
Welcome.
patiently for their time to shine. Like Mr. Fields before him, Aaron will be sharing his screen momentarily. While he's bringing that up, I'll do my typical quick sort of how did we get here. You'll recall it's probably been a couple years now when we started talking about the parcel on Jalbert Lane that the Housing Trust had looked at as an opportunity to develop an affordable housing property. A question was asked then, what else is out there? And so staff from a number of different departments, certainly Mr. Henry's department, but also Mr. King's department, engineering, code, the assessor's department, got together and put together a pretty exhaustive list of all of the town-owned properties. It started as a simple question to answer, a simple question about developable lots, but it's become something I think much more useful and something that Aaron and Stephen and their staffs will be able to use in a number of ways going forward, some of which Mr. Henry and Mr. King will walk us through tonight. We will answer the question as part of the presentation, but there's a lot more here that will help us shape some policy decisions in moving forward. So with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Bartha.
Welcome.
Good evening, board. Nice to see you again, even if it's virtual. As Steve laid out, the process around taking the town's inventory of land was kind of born out of the Housing Trust's work around 3 Jalbert Lane, which ultimately proved unfruitful due to the lot being almost completely covered in wetlands. But out of that, we identified the need to come out and have a better understanding of what's in our portfolio. As it goes, and we'll get into this as we go forward, this project does tie into 2 other things we're working on, some future zoning and land use proposals, and I'll stop on a slide just to reiterate that. We talked a little bit about that last summer at the Land Use Summit. And then also it had some implications for Mr. King's work with DEP and our water withdrawal renewal permit, our renewal activities around the permit. And the second half of the presentation will get more into that. So real quick, here's a broad overview. We have about 150 parcels of land in town. They kind of fall into 4 buckets. As we went through the exercise, they seem to kind of sort themselves into these 4 buckets. Improved sites, those are ones that have buildings, facilities, infrastructure. It could be a drainage facility, could be a building. There's also obviously a lot of those fell into open space that could be passive or recreation. And we'll touch on that a little bit later when we get to the water part, as there may need to be some movement or some consideration for credits with DEP. There was also a number of small parcels and remnants that we think, and again, we'll pause at that slide to talk more about that, whether or not these parcels may have some interest to abutters, that the town may consider disposing of these parcels. They don't appear to be useful to us for any potential other project. And so it may be a way to generate a little bit of revenue on the side, but we'll talk about that momentarily. And then finally, kind of to end with where we started, which was, are there any potential buildable lots out there that we may be able to have the trust do further investigations on, or even outright sell to the private market. So this is again the map showing all 150 parcels. Here's just a quick subset of that. This is the improved site. So this is schools, this is drainage, this is the town landfill, this is the right of way out to Middleton with an electrical service. This also includes some of the parcels like 12 Sylvan Street that have private tenancy in them, but are town owned. And we can come back for questions if you have any, but just wanted to kind of give you a view of the overview of each of the larger buckets. This one we'll pause on for a moment. We talked a little bit about future land use changes last summer at the Land Use Summit, particularly around the current zoning maps omission of open space in any capacity on the map. And when you look at the zoning map as a community's future build out map, meaning if you could fast forward the tape to 100% of every property exercising their rights, the current zoning map of the town, not 1 square foot of the community is open space. It is either all developed, about 70-something% of the town would be developed as single family homes. The remaining would be commercial, multifamily, or some combination thereof. And I think, again, we have, as this slide shows, a lot of parcels around town that are open space, that are either active or passive recreation opportunities for our residents. And I think the plan would be to leave them as such. I don't think we would want all of these parcels converted to some other use. So this is the concept that we've been talking about a little bit with some of the other regulatory boards, creating a civic space zoning district. And the open space parcels highlighted here would really form the backbone of that concept. Again, not something that we're pushing on anybody in the near term. We do want to start the conversation again and keep that conversation active, but no immediate timelines for that conversation. But just wanted to remind folks that we have talked about that, and I do think that that's something that staff recommends we talk more about with the policy boards as we go forward. In particular here, I'd also point out, and Mr. King will get into this on his part of the slideshow tonight, the new rules under the new proposed water permit may need the town to consider formally designating some parcels in our portfolio as conservation parcels in order to obtain credits under their program to increase the amount of water that we would be allowed to withdraw. And here we're highlighting a couple of the parcels that we're looking at for potential consideration. And again, Mr. King's part of the presentation will go more into the details on that, but LaBelle's Grove, Westover Farm, which is right nearby. It's in the Ipswich River Basin. It's just north of LaBelle's Grove. And also some North Street lots that the town owns that are very wet. Those are the ones behind, I think it's the Citgo gas station on at the bottom of North Street on Route 1. So just a quick pause here on this slide, and then finally, the final two slides. This identifies 9 parcels around town that are not buildable, do not appear to be have any development potential, but may have interest to abutters for inclusion, to get more backyard, to take advantage of in some way, but don't appear to create any sort of like, if I buy this, I can now subdivide my parcel. This would just be, this would increase the size of my backyard, or this would allow me an opportunity to maybe do a modest expansion of something that I'm currently a little too close to my lot line. So here's a list here. So there is a question here that I think Mr. Barth and I were looking for a little bit of feedback, and obviously we can double back with the board at a later date if need be. But basically the policy question we have for you here is, should we start looking into a process to solicit interest in abutters, or sit on these? And again, what I've talked to Mr. Barth about was, before getting too excited, I think the first step would be just reaching out to abutters to these parcels to figure out if there's any interest in them at all. Obviously, we don't want to engage in a process that's going to cost us time and money if no one around these parcels has any interest in them. So that's really, I think, the first question we have for the board tonight.
And if I could jump in there for a second, Aaron, I think
absolutely
one of the things we learned, there is a reason that exhaustive research hasn't been done on each and every one of these. Each parcel tells its own story. We were reminded of that when we discussed Jalbert. It turned out this property had been put out to auction by Dan Toomey many, many years ago. Nobody submitted a bid, and that flipped it into a different column of municipally owned property in the eyes of the Commonwealth. So what Aaron has said generally here is these are what we would call remnants or fragments that may be of interest to abutters. None of them on their own are buildable. None of them, based on very high level review, would change the zoning implications for any of the logical abutting properties. But if there was interest in learning more about these, we would do some preliminary analysis, but we wouldn't start down that rabbit hole if there wasn't interest in ultimately making these available to the abutters in each of the cases. So I just wanted to add that. I do see a hand.
I know you have a question.
I wanted to discuss discuss this when the town manager was done with his comments.
Yep, I'm all set. Thank you.
So I'll turn off my hand, and I'll say that having been on the board 15 years, and Dan and I were on the original Affordable Housing Committee, and I've been the chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust since it started. We're usually the ones who get the brunt of a lot of heat. And it's understandable, and we know that, and it's because there's no right place to start the conversation. If we start it with the residents, and so that we can prepare a package to bring to the selectmen are upset that they weren't the first ones to hear about it. If we start it with the selectmen, the residents get upset that they weren't the first ones to hear about it, and there's no real good starting point. We have our discussions and we do our planning at the Affordable Housing Trust with all good intention, and not trying to hide anything from anybody. But eventually, when it gets to the selectmen to make a proposal, someone's going to be upset. They didn't hear about it ahead of time. They didn't, they weren't the first ones to hear about it. Because if we went to the residents, they would hear about it and they would run to the selectmen. The selectmen would be very upset that they weren't clued in, and I get it. So we've talked about
how does that apply to these 9 parcels?
I'm getting there, Mr. Chairman. So my recommendation is that you do the outreach with the neighbors, because the last one that we actually took over and built, we'll remember on Jalbert, not Jalbert Lane. I'm trying to remember that they had the tomato. I'm sorry, what?
Oh, no, Lorraine.
Lorraine. That's it, Lorraine. Lorraine had the tomato patch, and of course, neighbors get upset, selectmen get upset, and in the end, the neighbors said they wouldn't have purchased that piece of land. They wouldn't have split it between them. They wouldn't have, paid a fair market value. They came to their own conclusion in meetings the selectmen directed, and they said, nope, even if it offered, we weren't going to buy it. So I think that if in smoothing this process, the housing trust would probably want to suggest that you go to the neighbors first and say, hey, you know, if you're interested, you'd have to get a fair market value and figure out the cost. But if you're not interested, thank you very much. We've done our due diligence. Then the Affordable Housing Trust, if it decides to pursue any of these, which we are not right now, we have no specific plans for anything, at least we'll have that step ahead that says the neighbors were notified that this land is available. They decided not to take advantage of it. That hurdle has been cleared.
Gardner,
So
may I
my
jump
recommendation
back
is
in
that
for one
you
second?
go ahead.
So the what you're describing, Gardner, is going to be on the next slide. So
Okay.
these are the fragments that would not meet the criteria that the housing trust is looking for. When we came, we sort of found two subcategories here. This is the one we would describe as sort of the remnants. The next one is what we would describe as the parcels. So they're two different policy questions. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, would you like to jump to the next slide and then we can
Yeah,
toggle
because
back and forth?
we can come back to this because there's no impact to the community. It's neighbors that are probably using these lots anyways. But we can come back to this. Let's go to the ones that Gardner's most concerned with.
Great. I'll move ahead one. So I think there was a lot of high hopes that we would find, several clearly buildable lots in our possession, and they'd be ideal, and the housing trust could win, and the town could win. And unfortunately, that parcels at the end of the rainbow doesn't exist. What we did find was 3 parcels potentially buildable, all need additional research and work to figure out if they are, in fact, or could be made buildable. Again, I would characterize these as all needing some sort of zoning relief, and that can come in a number of ways. But so these are like the largest of the parcels. We've seemed to obtain them through tax title, but they would all need research. So I think these are the lots that I think Mr. Trask was speaking to.
Right, and if I may, the board asked you to identify the spaces, the parcels in town. You've identified these 3 potential parcels. From my point of view, the board isn't going to take any action on them unless the housing authority deems that they are worthy of pursuing. And then they can
Authority or housing trust?
the Affordable Housing Trust. If they deem them as something they want to pursue, they have the means to do it, and they can approach the abutters. This board isn't going to tell the Affordable Housing Trust what to do on these 3 parcels. We just ask that you identify them, which you've done.
And we have a Affordable Housing Trust meeting tomorrow night, and I assume we will be double backing on this. And again, talking with Mr. Bartha about potential process on how to approach that. I think all of these I would want to do a little bit more due diligence on all of these before approaching the abutters, just because I'll pick on Jalbert Lane. In that case, it looked buildable, and then as we got into the process, we identified significant wetlands on the site, which rendered the lot unbuildable, and we kind of got everyone excited a little early in the process, and unfortunately it wasn't going to pan out. So to try to avoid that, I would recommend that the trust do that due diligence before we get too far down the road with anybody, such that 2 of these may fall off because it's just the determination that the zoning constraints or the wetland constraints are too high and not worth pursuing. So I think it'd be a little bit of more due diligence, similar to the title research that Mr. Bartha was talking about with the remnants.
So I think that's a good plan of action. Do your homework, reach out to the neighbors, and come back to us if you need to.
Just to reiterate then, and just as a point Aaron was making, I think Board Member Trask made the point earlier that there's historically a bit of a chicken and egg here. Do you approach the neighbors before the board? Do you approach the board before the neighbors? If we were to go out and do some some wetland testing without first engaging the abutters, they will see that. And I think, so Mr. Henry's correct. Some of these would require quite a bit of diligence. It's easy to do deed research from our desks, but prior to going out into the field, I think, making the trust aware of these parcels to start that discussion, and then engaging abutters to at least let them know that the trust, with sort of the blessing of the board to take a look, has started to kick the tires on the parcels. Does that make sense?
Who else has a, Gardner, is that your hand again?
If I didn't take it down, I apologize.
Somebody else with a question? So I just, board members, if you disagree, let me know, but I think let the Affordable Housing Trust do the due diligence, and if there's something that pans out, they can come back to us. But they've identified the parcels. That's all we ask for.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, I would hope that the takeaway from anybody watching the show, watching the meeting or later, the Affordable Housing Trust has taken no position on any of these three. We're not pursuing them. We haven't discussed them. So I don't want anybody to worry about their backyard.
Thank you. We just asked for an update to identify them.
Yep. That way, when we come to you, if we talk about these three, it won't be your first experience hearing about it.
Thank you. Anything else, Aaron, on this page?
No, I'll gonna drive the presentation for Mr. King for the second half of it as it relates to the water withdrawal permit. And I'll turn my camera off and go from there. Thank you all.
While they're
Do you want to go
switching,
back to the previous slide?
well, I don't know that we need to go back. I was just going to make a final point that with respect to the first policy question, so these are the three parcels that are theoretically buildable. The other 9 are not buildable. And some of these would require a vote of town meeting to put them out to auction, assuming there was even abutter interest. So we don't need decisions tonight, but at some point we may circle back to revisit these to find out if this board or a future board wants us to initiate any work on that front.
So at some point in time, do the work you need to determine if we can get them off our maps.
We can do some preliminary.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. That's helpful.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could they go back, I think 1 or 2 more slides to show the open spaces that they had delineated on the map? I've got a question about that or a comment about that.
Sure.
It's the one that has a green coloring in it.
It's up there now.
Okay. Those are all parcels that are controlled by the town of Danvers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of other open space in town that is not controlled by the town of Danvers. It's owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
And we had an instance last fall where they came to us. I understand, it's my understanding, that they wanted to rezone one of the parts of the cloverleaf of Dayton Center and Route 1 South. If you want to include all the available open space sites in town, there's almost a half square mile of land at the intersection of Route 1 and 95. There's a sizable amount of land that's owned and controlled by the Essex Tech. There's 350 acres of open space that the state owns that has an APR on it, which we got when we did the state hospital property. Yep. I think all those parcels and others that the state controls should be on this map as well as potential open space sites if we're looking for credits for later on for the water withdrawal.
I'll let Mr. King speak. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Excellent point. And again, that's why I suggested that these are just the town-owned parcels of open space. Obviously, there are other open space parcels, and that image, it looks very different when you include all of those parcels. So that I have a map, I have a version of that includes those. It's not part of this conversation because this was limited to just what's under town control, but understood completely. And we'll double back with the board at appropriate time with that broader concept showing some of the state-owned properties and those under agriculture restriction or 61A restriction, 61B restrictions, et cetera.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep. All right, so let me move forward, and I will turn my video off and hand the presentation off to Mr. King. And Stephen, if you just want to let me know when you want me to advance, I will do that for you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Appreciate it. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Select
You're
Board.
welcome, Mr. King, how are you tonight?
Good, thank you very much.
Good.
So I'm here actually to try and tie in from the previous slide, the open sites slide that was on Aaron's part of his presentation, and how that really intersects with myself working on our Water Management Act permit renewal, and how those certain parcels can actually play a big advantage in our renewal process that we're hoping to finalize in the next few months. Before I get into that, though, I kind of want to give everybody a brief history of how we got to where we are right now in filing for our permit. As some of you may know, in 2006, Danvers and Middleton had a settlement agreement with Mass DEP and the Ipswich River Watershed Association. This finalized our permit in 2006. That was due to expire in 2009 of August. Subsequently, in March 2009, the town filed for a new 20-year Water Management Act permit. In that process, the Patrick administration had filed a extension for permits, so that kicked it out 5 years before Mass DEP really had to respond to our first permit submission. So as in 2019, we finally received our comments back from Mass DEP regarding our initial application, in which we started working on our responses back to Mass DEP. In the interim between 2009 and 2019, Mass DEP made changes to the Water Management Act permittees, basically changing some of the parameters for water suppliers with permits. And this is how we get further on to the slide and presentations where we're going to show that in order to meet our total maximum demand that we're requesting, we're required to perform some type of mitigation activities. And for our case, and I'll walk you through the math later on, it's roughly we need to mitigate about 8% of our current withdrawal amount. If you want to go to the next slide, Aaron. So basically, what is mitigation credits in terms of water? There can either be direct or indirect activities commensurate with a request from any public water supplier to renew their permit for a permit volume greater than their 2005 withdrawal baseline plus or minus 5%. The baseline withdrawal was determined in the 2014 amendments to the Water Management Act, 310 CMR 36. And I'll take you through that math in the next slide. So basically now we have new requirements. We're required to perform mitigation activities to meet our total maximum demand that we're requesting from Mass DEP. These credits are required for any withdrawal difference between the baseline and supplier permit request. And they come in two forms. The first form is direct credit. That's a 1-to-1 ratio, basically recharge the withdrawal. So for in case of Danvers, if you've heard of our comprehensive lining system, that's a direct activity. So for every water that we don't allow to go into our wastewater collection system through inflow and infiltration, that's 1 additional gallon of water that we're able to withdraw to meet our permit requirements. Indirect credits are other activities that can be formed. They're not on a 1-to-1 ratio, but they do give you a certain amount of gallons per credit. So based on the slide here, you see 1 credit equals basically 1,000 gallons, 10 credits equals 0.01 million gallons per day. And basically these mitigation activities are inherent to trying to keep balance with the picture on the right, basically the water cycle. In between that water cycle that occurs every day, we're trying to promote recharge in the basin to be able to use that water for public water supply. I'll go on the next slide, Aaron. So how do they calculate the mitigation activities? Specifically for Danvers and Middleton, it's basically the mathematical term shown below. And this is a difference for us, specifically for Middleton, it's included in our permit. And due to Middleton being 100% in the Ipswich River Basin and basically 95% on-site septic systems, they actually gave us an adjustment ratio for the total amount of mitigation required by our permit, basically between the two towns. So we have our 2005 baseline withdrawal, which was roughly 3.18 million gallons per day, acronym called it BW. They put an adjustment factor of about 5% on that, which brings it up to 3.35 million gallons per day. Our permit request is for 3.72 million gallons per day. That was based on the settlement agreement in 2006. So we're required to mitigate 0.37 million gallons per day in order to meet our total maximum demand that we're requesting. But due to Middleton's and a partnership with Middleton and us supplying them with water, Mass DEP gave us an 85% adjustment to those mitigation activities, and we're required to mitigate basically 31 credits worth of activities. So on the next slide, I'll take you through what other credit activities Danvers can perform. So here you see the list of, we're going to go through the indirect credits first, because direct credits are pretty easy with a 1-to-1 ratio. We have indirect mitigation activities listed on the left, and we have the max credits listed on the right. These are credits that are available to both Middleton and Danvers combined. So for example, dam removal, we can't do a dam removal for Danvers and go for 25 points, and Middleton can't add in 25 points as well. It's basically a combined effort for all the indirect activities. Also, you see the asterisk to the next to the first 5 indirect mitigation activities. Those are projects that we did try to pursue with Mass DEP that we had previous projects on. These are all activities that can be prorated back to 2005. None of our construction projects, both in Middleton or Danvers, met the guidelines or requirements for those first 5. So that brings us into the next biggest max credit that we can go after, which is land protection. It's basically worth 15 credits between the towns of Danvers and the town of Middleton, based on the other activities that are available to us. And you can see some of the other ones listed are stormwater related, maintenance program related, septic system related, and habitat restorations. Aaron, can you go to the next slide? So I kind of broke it out into percentage of how important that land protection can be, the advantage of land protection can be for us in obtaining our indirect mitigation credits to meet our maximum withdrawal demand of 3.72 million gallons per day. It's obviously 22% of the total credit worth of the 31 credits. Again, it's both something that Danvers and Middleton can do. So you kind of see it at the combined Venn diagram. There are activities that are related strictly to Danvers, and there's activities strictly related to Middleton. For instance, they can impose a private well bylaw, which is worth 10 credit points. They can provide a septic system maintenance and operations plan to their residents and have it available for everybody to use. That's worth 5 points. Danvers, on the other hand, we just updated our wetlands bylaw. We're going to get mitigation activity points for that. We have an inflow and infiltration program, operation and maintenance program, which we're getting credits for as well, as part of our renewal process. And then in between, we have stormwater and land protection, the 2 big things that both communities can partner on to achieve our goal of getting our 3.72 million gallons per day. Aaron, going to the next slide. Oh, Aaron.
It's up there.
So I'm a little bit delayed on my end. So what is land protection? It's land that can be protected for water supply protection or for conservation, placed under a restriction or easement no earlier than January 1st, 2005. We're available for up to 15 credits for land protection. Water supply protection land is eligible for 0.2 credits per each acre acquired. Other conservation land, which is not covered on the priority, which would be 0.2 as well, is eligible for 0.1 credits per acre. And here I put in a tally sheet, basically the credits available between both communities and credits that we've obtained in conversations with Mass DEP. Don't want to look too much into the math on this obtained credits, because I put an asterisk next to the 2.9 credits from land protection. That is what Middleton has confirmed that they would like to achieve through approval of their board or selectmen or select board. But they have not confirmed that they actually will be able to protect that land under water supply. So I didn't include that in the total. So if you can remember from the earlier slides, we're required to mitigate roughly 31 credits. We're sitting at right now 28 credits. So there's a difference of 3 credits that we need to make up in order to achieve our total withdrawal demand. You go to the next slide. Aaron?
It's up.
Okay. And so this leads us back to the open space slide that Aaron had and some of the property parcels that he called out. So in the process of him looking for open space and me looking for land to potentially protect, we came to discovery of these parcels in the town that would be eligible for either water supply protection or land protection through conservation. I separated them into 2 categories, or Aaron adds as a 0.2 credit per acre and a 0.1 credit per acre. And this is where I would, follow up with Mass DEP to verify these parcels are okay in order for them to give us the maximum credits available to us. And then obviously return to the board to seek approval if you want to go in that direction to make up the mitigation credit deficit that we're in right now, to protect some of these lands to get those 3 credits.
Steve, can I ask a question at one of those spots?
Go ahead.
River Meadow lot. What is that? Where is that?
Bill, this is Aaron. I think River Meadow is over by the town forest, if I remember correct. It was some
sliver.
Yeah, remnant of some other development, and the title calls itself.
I didn't know whether it was the meadows on Hobart Street or not, which I don't see included here, which also would be a sizable piece of property, I would think, that I don't believe has any restrictions on it.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember the status of the meadows in particular. But yeah, that you bring up a point though. Some parcels were already owned by the Conservation Commission, so I was trying to find some parcels that were owned by the town generally. But I don't remember the meadows off the top of my head, Bill. I'll look into that.
The other question I have is about LaBelle's Grove. I was involved with the purchase of that, and I think at the last moment, Wayne and our then former director negotiated with the state for an additional $400,000 towards paying for it, but we had some sort of restriction placed on those 2 properties at LaBelle's Grove because it's in the Zone 1 for the wells.
Correct.
Is this not appropriate for this or what?
That is kind of a highlight area that we are definitely looking at for a potential land to use, because as you can see, even if we do put it under the conservation and make sure we follow their guidelines, that's two credits. It's also eligible for, if we wanted to go through water supply protection, which is a little more stringent, based on their standards and their guidance for water supply protection, it would be eligible for the 4 credits and would push us over the limit.
But that would limit that property for the use that it could be used for then, would it not? Yeah, because we already are limited dramatically by the state with that $400,000 we got for the purchase of it. Those of us who are on the committee never realized that Wayne and Karen negotiated that away when they purchased the property for the $2 million or so. It would have been a better deal for us just to not have the $400,000 from the state, and not have the limitations on it. But just a question. That's all. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Aaron,
I'm sorry, to build on Selectman Fox's question, I realize it's not part of the wetlands, but that $400,000 that the credit, is that something Danvers could buy its way out of if it wanted to, so that it could reduce the number of restrictions we had?
This is Steve. I don't know the answer. That question has come up. We have not pursued that with the state. Whether we could reimburse them for the grant amount and have the restrictions dissolve. For the purposes of what Aaron and Stephen are talking about now, is we were trying to identify parcels, and I think LaBelle's being an example. There are already restrictions in place there, and it may be a virtually zero lift to qualify for the 2 credits. The 4 credits might require further restrictions, but one of the questions we're trying to resolve, and Stephen may have the answer tonight, is you know, if we were to pursue the 0.1 credit per acre, would that, you know, blend almost seamlessly with the current restrictions on that property?
Correct, and that's something that DEP has said that is eligible land and can be protected if you want to go through the 0.1 credit process, which isn't a heavy lift. But then again, we're still waiting on. I guess we kind of want to see whether or not Middleton is going to be able to put their land under protection as well, or if we want to kind of just hold this off to the side, because again, through the whole permit process, there is, once they write the draft permit, there is an appeal process or a review and comment process that allows you know petitioners, citizens, and watershed groups and advocacy groups to comment on how the draft permit is written, and that could change a few of the totals that Mass DEP has kind of verbally agreed to giving to both the towns. So we may just want to have these, you know, set aside and know that if we do need to make up a bigger difference for our totals, that we have something to fall back on.
So if I can interrupt, Steve, and just to get a better understanding, how many credits do we have and how many credits do we need?
Right now we have 28 credits confirmed.
Yes.
If you go back.
That's what that's what you said.
Yeah. And we're still waiting confirmation from Middleton that their board of selectmen are willing to put those 14.5 acres under water supply protection, which would give us 2.9 credits, addition to the 28 that we have now.
But we need how many?
We need 31 credits.
31 credits. So these 3 parcels that you have identified will give you how many credits?
So
they say Westover, LaBelle's, and the Forest.
So based on the tally sheet, if we just want to go on the 0.1 credit total, that would give us basically eight credits.
But you don't need 8 credits, correct?
But we don't need 8 credits.
So I think your point was to hold some back if you have to.
Right. If we have to make up some type of difference in the phasing of the permit being written, or any advocacy groups pushing back on DEP and allowing some of the credit points that they've already given us, we have something extra to use to say that we can protect these other lands and they should be well worth the 0.1 credit that you've based in your guidelines. Because they're specifically around.
To hold some of it back in the event you need them, because once you commit to them.
Once you commit to them, then they're going to write it in there and they want to see it. So I'd like to.
But then the next time around, they'll want you to get more credits. You won't have anything to fall back on.
That's correct. That could be a potential.
But Stephen, can you speak to the timing here? So if the permit gets issued and it identifies each of these parcels as potential credits, that doesn't mean that we would necessarily be obligated to move them into a protected category. We would be able to we would know what they would be worth if we chose to do that in order to achieve our credit totals.
And move only what you need.
Right, because we don't want to write more into what we don't want to have to write any more into the permit than we need. If we have the 31 credits, then we leave it at the 31 credits.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't think you want to shoot the whole 15 credits.
No.
Okay. Thank you. No. Thank you.
So this kind of leads us just into the next steps as we're proceeding through the permit process. It's been obviously a long back and forth since 2019 with Mass DEP. So I like to kind of just finalize combined mitigation activities to meet or exceed the 31 credits, or know that I could exceed it if necessary with the proper process. I am expecting to be able to finish up the permit and get a draft permit back to us from Mass DEP this spring. They're really pushing to get that completed. Also, interlocked with that is obviously renewing our intermunicipal agreement with Middleton, which will be directly related to any new restrictions or regulations put in the permit that we need to offset with Middleton. moving forward. Other activities, continue a stormwater utility feasibility investigation. In the earlier slides, there are credit points that can be allotted to creating a stormwater utility, which we may be able to use for the future. Still looking at potential alternative water source locations and identifying those areas within the Ipswich River Basin or the North Coastal Basin. And then also just continuing to work with our state delegation and representatives on these issues related to our Water Management Act and public water suppliers. And I'll take any other questions that you may
Is
have.
there anything you need from us specifically, or just you're giving us an update?
This is more of an update. So obviously still going to work to make sure, the tally between Danvers and Middleton is equal, and we're not doing more than what we need to do to achieve our credits. So I'm still, pushing on there and to make sure that whatever they can commit to, that they will commit to.
Maureen, any questions for Stephen?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
David?
It's not so much a question, but I don't know, maybe you, Dan, asked Stephen what we could do to make it easier. All I can say is I want to applaud Stephen for the back and forth with the state agency, waiting around for responses so that, once you get your project going, to be able to, I don't know, I just feel a lot of lag time between our submissions and appropriate, responsible action by the state agency. So I just want to say I applaud you for being able to do that, Stephen. I certainly couldn't. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Bill?
I want to applaud Stephen also. I know this is a very complicated issue, and it's one that I've been trying to pursue ever since I've been on the Board of Selectmen, and it's very frustrating at times. But I think you're salvaging as much as we can salvage at this point in time, and I think that we have some good strategies available to us once we get this permit for future increased consumption if we have to. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Gardner?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
That's it, if you're all set. Good night. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you all. Have a good
Good
night.
night.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, Stephen.
Town manager will report to the board on various items of interest. Steve?
It's hard to follow all those acts. I'll be brief. Just a reminder, looking ahead, in your next board packets, you'll be getting a draft of the revenue and expenditure summaries for the fiscal year 22 budget. You'll also have the departmental detail sheets and an overview of the capital plan that we'll be reviewing on the 13th. So per the charter, the staff delivers to the select board a balanced budget on or before March 1st each year, which becomes the basis for the board to ask questions, make changes, and move the budget on to the finance committee. So you'll be getting those Friday, I think Friday the 28th of February. So we'll be delivering that with the packets for the next select board meeting. You'll have the transmittal letter as well. So we're close to a balanced budget. Little tougher sledding this year with the headwinds that we've been discussing for months now. But we're looking forward to giving you a draft and then reviewing that with you in mid-March. One quick update, there will be a call going out. I don't think it'll be going out tonight, more likely tomorrow, but we have I think the town partnered with Beverly, Salem, Marblehead, and Swampscott to pool what are our very limited vaccine resources. You probably recall through my updates and also through the news that communities were allotted 100 vaccines per week to be used locally. It did not make sense for these communities to stand up their own clinics with that limited number. So we're doing basically a kind of a mobile or rotating clinic across the community. So this Thursday, we'll be hosting a vaccine clinic at the Danvers Senior Center. It'll be staffed by public health professionals from the region. So we're going to be putting a call out to the community probably tomorrow, letting folks know that we still have some slots there. This would be for the 75 plus phase, or anybody who had qualified in an earlier phase and did not choose to, or was not able to make an appointment or chose not to make an appointment. So I think 8 o'clock tomorrow morning is when the call will be going out for Thursday. And I'll say it now, but what that call is going to ask folks is if you do qualify for a vaccine in the current phase and you'd like to go Thursday and make an appointment at the senior center, you can either go to the website, www.danversma.gov/COVID for information on how to register, or if you want to just call the main line 978-777-0001 and choose option 1, which is for COVID information. If you leave a name, a number, and a brief message, somebody from staff will be checking that and calling you back to help you make an appointment for Thursday.
Steve, you can't target 75 and over. You're going to call the general populace?
Yeah, we don't have a way to limit that call. So hopefully if you're not 75 and you get that call and somebody who has been waiting, maybe reach out to them and try to work with them. Doesn't
the senior center have a database of?
So we have a list going, and we're also working. We're working with Cindy Dunn from the Housing Authority to try to help identify members in their properties who may want to come Thursday. But yeah, it's a blunt instrument, Dan. We don't have a scalpel to do this. So it's going to be a broad call going out. It'll be in a different town next week, but this Thursday it's in Danvers. So we want to make sure, any seniors who would like to be vaccinated at the senior center is aware of that opportunity.
Would you update the board with those figures you gave me this morning on the over 75s that have been or haven't been vaccinated?
Yeah, the chairman asked a question this morning about where we are with vaccinations for our seniors. Judith Reiner, public health nurse, was able to pull some data out of the state public health database that we use. So we have about 4,500 residents in Danvers who are 75 or older, and that includes everybody who's in a long-term care facility. It would include the Zavarian brothers at the rest home, St. John's, and private facilities. And as of this morning, just under 40%, around 37% of those folks had received at least their first vaccine, and 7% had received both doses. So progress certainly, but long way to go. And that's just phase 1.
It's not very encouraging at all. Thank you.
Gardner, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. At the last meeting, I asked about 2 different criteria, and I don't realize they don't relate to the availability of the vaccine that you just spoke of. But I didn't hear the answer about where do people with a diagnosis of autoimmune deficiency come in, if they're, that's a specific diagnosis. And also, you were going to check into when it comes to when it's time for teachers. What about other professionals, paraprofessionals who are in close contact with students as well, who may not be certified as teachers? Custodial staff could be someone in the in other departments that reach and touch students.
I haven't seen an answer to those as of today, but we'll get a note out to the board tomorrow with answers to both those questions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I don't have it tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. What else, Steve?
Those are the 2 items I wanted to update the board on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have a motion on the consent calendar, please?
Mr. Chairman, Selectman Trask, motions consent calendar.
Second, Mills.
Who's the second from who?
Mills.
Thank you, Mills. Roll call vote. Bernard,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Mills,
Yes.
Trask,
Yes.
Chairman as well. Thank you. Time for correspondence, Selectmen, new business, anything on your mind, updates, closing comments? Now's your chance. Gardner?
No, I have no new business. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
As I've been doing over the last several years, I'd like to recognize a couple of former town employees who've passed away in the last couple of weeks. One of them is Glennis Kelly, who was a health education teacher at Danvers High School and a very dedicated individual, wonderful woman. She and her husband both died within 2 days of each other. Kind of a sad story. The other one is Eric Wormstead, who was an elementary school teacher in Danvers for a number of years. Eric and I played softball 50 years ago together, and he was a coach and teacher in Danvers for many years. And after his retirement, he was a consultant for one of the science education programs. In addition to those two notices, I'd just like to say I'd like to wish the people of Danvers continued good health. The inoculation, I had mine last week at the Doubletree up in Hawthorne, and I did not have a problem with my wife got the schedule for me, and I had about a 20 or 30-minute wait to go in there. The next day, it was a real bad show, but I think they're going to get their act together, and they've got a really good process up there to work with. And I also want to ask the people of Danvers, specifically as a small business person, would you please try to support your small businesses in town? This has been an unbelievable over the COVID situation, and we're on the verge of losing several of our local businesses if they don't get your support. And it doesn't take that much effort, I don't think, to make purchases from our local business rather than just the big box retailers. So I'm putting out the plea from small businesses for the people to try to help them. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's left?
Maureen.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to say thank you to all the presenters tonight. That was a bunch of information. Everybody did a great job. We did have a lot of questions. Apologize to the folks of Danvers for keeping you on so long. Steve, thank you for what you do and the COVID with us senior citizens. Mr. Chairman, I did have a question for you with regards to the Beverly Airport expansion, because there's been a lot of concerns with that. And are we letting the residents know that a representative will be coming and visiting one of our meetings to talk about, the impact that this expansion is going to have on the neighborhoods with their touch and goes? And I've watched some of the meetings, so I'd like the residents to know that there is going to be an airport representative coming on to the meeting to talk about this.
So the agenda isn't set yet, but the manager from the airport has confirmed she can join us on March 2nd.
Okay.
Along with our two representatives to update us and answer questions. My hope is that we can do it in person so the public can actually ask questions. This format will not be sufficient for the public to ask questions in a reasonable manner. So, but we will have the airport folks, our folks, before us on the March 2nd.
And who are the two representatives, Mr. Chairman? for
Aaron
the-
Henry and Mr. Moser, is it?
Oh, yeah, Moser, that's right.
Moser,
Okay, yep.
Yeah, so they've attended the meetings. They'll be able to update us.
That would be great, because I
Questions
know.
about the runway that we don't have yet answered. We're waiting for
Okay.
those.
Right.
We should also think of inviting at a future meeting Seth Moulton or his representative to
Okay.
represent the FHA's position on this. But we'll get to the first step with the airport manager in the second.
And that's just to clarify that's going to be for March 2nd for, if we're live, for people
Don't
to
know
come and
if we're
voice.
Early in the meeting, Steve says we don't know about the guy.
We don't know yet, right.
We
But
don't know.
people should register if they want to comment and be part of the meeting, correct? With us?
We'll determine the rules of engagement as we determine where and when we're meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Steve.
No problem. So I don't have to update you on the airport. You got asked the question. Very good, Maureen. Thank you. So if there's no other business to come before the board, please remember the veterans and good night, Danvers. Stay safe.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you all.